Hello, podcast listener. This is your host with the most. Today's episode, oh boy, we get to touch on everything because our good friend Bryan Poyzer comes in, and guess what? He's just like me. We could talk for hours, but you're only going to get 1 hour of the fun today. Sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
JJ, can you give me a quick test?
Yep, check. JJ Meets World.
Yeah, we're
Tucker's
rolling.
reading Dune.
We're rolling. We're good. Heretics of Dune.
Oh, Heretics of Dune.
Book 5.
Book 5. Of what, 26? There's 26 Dune books or something?
7 that he wrote. And then
Okay.
after he died, his son decided to cash in. And so Ghost wrote like 30 that are supposed to be awful.
I wrote some Dune fan fiction one day, and it's all set in this diner, right? And it's all the characters
Can
who just
you write
go into
fan
the
fiction
diner.
if you're not a fan of Dune?
No, yes, and it actually makes it better because I'm not dialed into everything that you need, so I kind of get to do whatever I want. I've also written a fan fiction for the show The Nanny.
Nice.
Yeah, and in this one, the nanny gets amnesia, and she thinks that she's rich. I'm telling you,
that's
like
great.
I think they could have picked that one
I
up,
should have been.
right? By the way, Bryan is our guest today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, so long story short, I got to know Bryan because Madison Quinn, who's been on our show before, Madison was a student of Bryan's at NDSCS, and they were doing a 50-year reunion for the choral group they have down there. And then it turns out that Bryan and I are almost the same person.
Yes, and my wife has said this since meeting JJ and listening to the radio and some things, and she's like, "You found someone else out there who has that appreciation for Broadway." Pop culture, arts and leisure, and it's like, yeah, that's the title of his podcast, Arts and Leisure.
Yeah. Do you,
Yeah, right.
Do you drink Diet Coke?
I do not drink Diet Coke, but she does. So,
Okay.
see, you got that going
Hits
for
and
us.
misses, hits and misses.
It's how you know like who the real one is. Like,
Exactly.
So if they
Yep.
were ever made with like blanks of us. Also, I'm really excited because we get to dive into the Muppets a little bit on this one too.
Which I brought
right?
you a gift. Can I give you the gift
Yeah,
first?
I'd love to see this gift. What are we looking at?
Your late Christmas gift. This is well, first of all, I went into JJ's house for 10 minutes to do a thing, and he had a vinyl of the Muppets Haunted Mansion
It's a Christmas Carol.
Christmas-
it
oh,
was
the Christmas
the new
Carol. Okay.
release of their Christmas
on
Carol.
vinyl, and he
Okay.
showed it to me, and we didn't have time to talk about it. And after I left, I thought, I hope he wasn't think I was just being polite. I really was impressed. I mean, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool for someone to appreciate that genre. So I brought you my 1978 Muppet Show TV guide, and I want you to have it for your little
Oh my
nook.
God!
And I've had this for a while, and it's got a nice story about Jim Henson in there. But yeah, it's
And it's the original Fozzie too. Like
is.
it's that kind of more Milton Berle-ish look to him
Yes.
for Fozzie.
Why don't you let this be the thumbnail. Why don't you hold it up there?
It's also got a cigarette ad on the back too.
yes, go figure.
So that's how you know how legit it is. Okay, so you're also a major collector, Bryan.
Yeah.
You've got collections.
I've got some toys, which they always say, people my age, they collect toys for certain reasons. Either they didn't have them as a kid and they want to go get them, or they had them, mom threw them out, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And I'm kind of a little bit of everything. I think I was spoiled rotten as a kid. I had a lot of these things. But as you get older, the nostalgia kicks in, and you'll go maybe pick up a piece that you didn't have, or you'll start to, wish there was something that should have been created, that wasn't, and you go out and get it. So again, talking to you guys, it's fun, you and Madison, because we're different generations. We can appreciate certain things, but you look back, and my 70s is probably your 80s or your 90s.
Right.
So
And I think it's interesting because I was a fan of the original Star Wars trilogy because it played on television and VHS tape and everything. And then when I was in 7th grade, they did the re-releases.
Sure.
That blew my mind. What a genius idea. You release one in February, one in March, one in April. And then when we talked to Madison, he is a prequel
he saw
guy.
the prequels first.
Yeah.
Who does this?
And I mean, I have to get over that, right?
He's Gen Z, right? Is he Gen Z?
I don't know what he born in 99, I think he was.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
so whatever we're calling that
Gen Z.
these days. Is that Gen Z?
I think so.
Okay.
So when does a millennial start?
Millennial. You and I are both technically millennials. I think.
Okay, so we're not Gen X, we're not Gen Z, we're in the middle.
I think you and I are both actually Zennials, though, which is another term that's like someone who falls into the millennial age range, but has a lot of Generation X characteristics to them as well. And so I think the early 80s, specifically, that first half of the 80s, is sort of a Zennial window because we're the ones who didn't have internet, didn't have cell phones, but then that all came about in our, our childhoods and our teenage years. So we kind of watched this whole changeover go on. But like our kids are already in school. I think they're called Gen Alpha, Gen A, because it like cycles back around after Z.
And what age do you have to be if you're part of the Pepsi generation?
That's what. Yeah, I'm not sure.
There's anything that loves it,
Right.
Okay.
I think you have to be Janet Jackson.
Yeah, so for me, it's like the nostalgia is that I'm birthed to 10 years old, so it becomes 70s. So the Muppet Show, hello, Sesame Street basically what came out the year I was born. Muppet Show when I was 7 or 8. So you have it was there like throughout your early childhood, but it was impactful because pre-cable television, DVDs, we didn't have VHSs. I mean, come on, it was a special thing to see these.
Well, and you had to be home to watch it too, right?
Yes,
because
must see TV.
Replays were not really something, you maybe had to fill in if they didn't get an episode done in time or something like that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating to talk to other people from generations to say that, we had to stay home on Friday night if we wanted to watch that. And the Muppets, whether it be the Sesame Street version or the actual Muppet Show, which is brilliant in its own, in its own way.
Did you know that they never had the same guest twice?
Isn't that crazy?
So I was just reading a piece about the Muppet Show recently where they're talking about no one ever talks about this, but they didn't have the same guest twice. And you would think at that time, okay, so if Carol Burnett is a big hit and you get big ratings, you want to bring Carol Burnett on the next season. They're like, no, there's so many other people. And the way they chose guests. So one of my favorite episodes is they have this famous French flautist.
Oh,
and he's the host. And you think, well, what are you going to do with this guy? English isn't his first language. Is he just going to keep playing the flute? And then they did a Pied Piper sketch at the end that is genius, where the rats at the Muppet Theater were sick and tired of being thought of as what we're always ruining everything. And so Kermit's like, don't worry, we'll fix it. And instead they have a bunch of German children who are taking bites out of the walls and stuff like that. And so the mice are the ones who pay the Pied Piper, take them out. And then, of course, because it's the Muppet Show, they play Ease On Down the Road from The Wiz, but it's all on a flute, right? And it's just wonderful.
I agree with that. And you look at the list, it's on Disney Plus, obviously now. It's and being filmed in England, you got those English people. As little kids, we didn't care. Juliet Prowse, bring her on. Elka Summer, great. We didn't care. It was live music in our house. Where we very
the kids
rarely
are there
had
for the Muppets, right?
Exactly.
Like the star, you still want that in to kind of guide the episode and get more eyeballs. But the kids are there for Kermit and Miss Piggy and Fozzie.
I read the Brian Jones, Jim Henson biography a few years ago, and then I just re-listened to it this last fall. And one of the things I find so intriguing is the fact that the idea that this is made for kids makes Henson cringe, right? He's like, I'm not making a show for kids. I'm making a show that everyone can enjoy. And I've gone back and rewatched some of those when they started releasing them on DVD. And I was like, there is such great adult humor mixed into what is essentially family friendly fare that what Pixar does now, he was doing 50 years ago.
Yeah, Pigs in Space is a soap opera.
It is, and a great one at that.
And my father-in-law still, I love Pigs in Space. I'm like, I get it now. I look back too and I think, genius, just smart writing.
I think one of the first shows I had ever seen on TV that did a special where they showed how they did everything might have been a Muppets episode, because I have a memory, I'm pretty sure this was Muppets, where I think it was Kermit, they were talking about how if a Muppet's going to pick up a phone receiver, then what it is the puppet reaches over, touches it, then they cut, and then they swap it out and attach it, and then bring it back. And then Kermit was like, that's not how that works. And like he picks it up and then he tries to put it back down and he can't get rid of it. I'm pretty sure that was the Muppets that did something like that made me go, whoa, what am I seeing here? And I've never seen this before.
I think you're talking about the Jim Henson Hour.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, because they do. Do you remember the Jim Henson Hour that they tried, which was a neat experiment for what they were doing? But I think that bit happens during the Jim Henson Hour because they're explaining this, and they keep cutting back to this like television control room where all the Muppets are.
Okay,
and they're like, no, and like
I think
it's just genius.
My favorite conceit of the Muppets is that they exist in a world where humans and Muppets just coexist. They're just everywhere, right? So like when you're watching Muppet Christmas Carol, which is the best telling of a Christmas Carol of all time, and seeing like, you know, like a big, polar bear, I think, is walking through the town at one point, and there's all this other weird stuff. And yeah, if you're mail carriers, the dolphin, you're like,
talk. And
yep. Everyone's just like, that's how life works. I just love that that's the rules and reality of that universe.
I have a really strict feeling on that. So to me, the Muppets have all found each other, right? And I hate when they call them losers. Like, oh, these are these
lovable
are losers
yeah.
who get together. And I'm like, no, these are people who are trying to put on a show. And anyone who's ever put on a show knows sometimes stuff falls flat. Like Fozzie Bear, like that is really what most like vaudeville comedians are like until they work out a really great bit. But I have this feeling that it's this. The Muppets exist for the Muppets. I don't like when you've got something where there's like a Muppet television reporter that has nothing to do with the group.
Oh, they just made a new character.
World. Yeah. So for example, in The Muppets, the movie from 2011, I love the idea that there's this one weird kid out there who sees the Muppets like, I got to be a part of that. What I don't like is like in the theater where you've got the hobo Muppets with Zach Galifianakis, and I'm like, no. Like Muppets all find this group together. I also have told this to Tucker many times. If you can't expertly do showing a Muppet like head to toe, don't do it. Don't do it. It's not worth it. So like... when they do the dance, the vaudeville dance in the Muppet movie,
right?
I can buy that for a little bit
because human hands are making the feet move too, so like the legs have a weird.
It just looks weird.
What about when Kermit and Miss Piggy are on the bicycles?
I love that. I love that because you know it's engaging me and it's great. Like I'm the. But when they show the Swedish Chef doing like a ninja style like air kick, no, I don't need that. No, thank you. Let's talk about nostalgia for a second, too, because I think you hit on something good there, Brian, which is I think nostalgia is a commodity for people like you and I these days. And you mentioned like there's numerous types of collectors, right? The have-nots from their childhood, the I remembers, and the people who just like continued. It just got my paycheck just got a little bit bigger as time went on.
Yeah.
I think nostalgia is a commodity these days, and I think people pay for it.
And COVID, I think, bought into it. I think a lot of us, when we stayed home, we spent a lot of time online doing some things, and the rabbit holes you go down, to try to connect with people, and the Facebook groups that I all of a sudden became a part of. And you can find someone regardless of whatever your interest is. If I was a fan of the $6 Million Man as a kid, believe it or not, there's a group out there. If I want to replace some of my toys that I had when I was 3 or 4. There's a museum out there that actually shows me how to do that. And it's, you hate to say live in the past, whatever. But I think during COVID, that was healthy. I really do. I think you're looking back at some things and making some connections and whether it's toys or programming or streaming or buying a DVD, if you found a Blu-ray of something you can't believe they have a Blu-ray version of this, because I enjoyed it in 1978. Go get it. I mean, COVID was the perfect time for these types of things to happen.
Tucker was just doing that. He goes on, what's the website you go on to check to see if something's on Blu-ray?
Blu-ray.com.
Blu-ray.com.
Yep.
And he was telling me he's like shocked at the amount of stuff that didn't make its way onto Blu-ray.
Well, the Louis Anderson cartoon was one you talked about.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? Because they already have Muppet Babies, and they have a lot of those era things on Blu-ray. But yeah, sometimes things fall through the cracks.
People wonder why the folks pirate stuff online. And it's because, you didn't make it available to me, right? Like, I want to watch an HD version of Muppet Babies or, see what this. Also, by the way, Muppet Babies is how did they figure out how to make that work? Because you've got Star Wars clips in there. Like, there's so much content that is in each episode. I am just mind boggled at who was able to produce that and be like, yeah, we'll just borrow the rights from here and borrow the rights from here and no sweat and we'll make a deal.
Well, let's talk about the Muppet Show again, copyrights of those songs.
Yeah.
The songs that were coming out of that show in 3 years, who got, Paul Simon's on there, but he's singing 3 of his songs. Someone owns this. I don't think anybody else from Disney could have gotten those, collections together. No one else has an amount of money to do that.
I imagine once the Muppet Show hit, it was sort of like when Weird Al calls you, right? It's a huge honor that they're going to do one of your numbers. And there's a great story about the Village People's manager getting a call and they're going to do In the Navy on the Muppet Show. And these guys were just over the moon that the Muppets were going to do this. And then what they did is they turned it into, it's a Viking ship and it's about like the Vikings singing In the Navy. And they go and they pillage a town while like the whole thing is going on. And it's just brilliant the way that they do that. And so, that had to have been what a huge honor in some cases, right? And they did everything from Broadway to rock to, to oldies. I love when why can't I think of his name all of a sudden? The guy who wrote Rainbow Connection and
Paul Williams.
Paul Williams. When Paul Williams is on and he sings Old-Fashioned Love Song, with all the multiple versions of himself coming out of the radio is just fantastic.
That version gives me chills because first of all, there's not a lot of serious Paul Williams stuff out there, where he is kind of serious in this song. It's this melancholy song. So I do love that exists somewhere. Back to the copyright things, there's a guy who's going to release a documentary in a couple of years, and I can't remember his name, but he wants to deep dive into the variety shows of the 70s, where everybody had a show, whether it's someone who had a yearly show like a Glenn Campbell, Johnny Cash, those type of things, or the ones that lasted 2 or 3 years, Donnie and Marie, the McNichols, the Mandrell sisters, and his dad was like one of the main producers to get talent for these shows.
Oh, really?
So this is like the perfect guy to do to do a documentary and understand it. And then they interviewed Donny Osmond on the same interview, and Donny Osmond has been trying to get the Donnie and Marie show on syndication, and it's impossible because they did top songs, Broadway, rock. They did songs from Grease because they had Olivia Newton-John on. They had a Broadway person on. They did song, and the money is just, they can't do it. So it's just a fascinating process because I would love to have a channel. I mean, forget about a special. Give me a cable channel that just shows all this wonderful music and these performers of the 70s and even in the 80s. But financially, how do you pull that off if you're singing Zeppelin in a variety show, Anyway, so this guy's going to do a documentary, and of all the things to do a documentary of, he's going to focus on the 1978 Star Wars Christmas special. Okay? And he says he's the person to do it because his dad was involved, but he also knows the formula. Because we look at that and we just like, what were you thinking? That kind of thing, where he understands the formula of who you had to get these things on the air. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. I wish I knew his name, but yeah.
I think like the variety shows of yesteryear, I'm waiting for someone to do something today because that would be a huge hit with folks. I was, the Super Bowl is right around the corner from the taping of this. And I went on a rabbit hole the other night. I stayed up until 2:00 in the morning watching old commercials because the way they made a commercial like late 70s, early 80s is so much different than the way you make a commercial now. And I re-fell in love with the David Naughton I'm a Pepper commercials.
Oh, sure.
Right. And I thought to myself, you know what we haven't had in the Super Bowl in a long time? Something that's singable that people are humming the next day on the way to work. And that's what the I'm a Pepper series was, right? And you just, like, there's like 20 of those things, and they just keep rewriting over and over and over again. Like, like I'm like Marion Peppers, Carrion Peppers, and just Popeye's in one of them. And it just is a fun, like, just idea. And we just don't see anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know what the marketing research, what they're telling us what people want. I don't know, because if you get an earworm, that's going to sell for years. I just was reading something on Barry Manilow on his jingles, and I can't remember exactly which ones he wrote. It was a bunch of people, and there, the Alka-Seltzer, the Plop Plop Fizz Fizz, the Dr. Pepper one was in there. That might have been a Barry Manilow one. State Farm Insurance, Like a Good Neighbor, that's Barry Manilow.
Really?
Yeah, and they wrote all these things, and they're still used today, even if it's a background 5 or 6 notes. It just kind of gets in your head. But yeah, you're right. When's that Super Bowl ad going to come where we're all humming it on Monday morning?
Right?
Oh.
And we talk about like, that Tide commercial was great, or I really, the Budweiser one really got some emotion out of me. But other than, you have to see a Clydesdale like go by for you to be like, oh yeah, that Budweiser commercial versus like the humming and singing it and having someone else in your office be like, I'm a pepper too. Just coming along with you. I love Barry Manilow. I'm gonna throw that out there. Like, why don't people love him more? Or do they just give him crap? Is it just easy? Is he like Kenny G, where he's low hanging fruit?
Maybe. I mean, I'm a fan of Low. I'll say it. I've seen him. I've seen him in concert, and it is a brilliant show. When you think of him in the '70s, I saw him probably in 1990, and he was just as strong delivering a lyric. We always say that in music, whether you wrote the song or not, if you can deliver that lyric, you're going to stand out. And Sinatra pointed at him and said, he's next. That's all you would need for me to say, okay, I'm done. Sinatra says, I'm next as far as getting that lyric out there. And I still think there are people trying to get there. I think Adele is probably next in line to that because people are just mesmerized by her delivering a lyric. She doesn't have to write it herself. But yeah, he has his strong fans. But I think, maybe he's an easy target. All soft, all similar style songs. But yeah, he's legendary in my opinion.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Exactly.
I fell in love with these lounge acts when I was like in my early 20s. So much so that like when I went to Las Vegas with my friends, they're like, yeah, we're all going to go, we're going to go out gambling and then we're going to do this. And I'm like, later, guys, Tom Jones is playing at the MGM. Got to bring a pair of my underpants to throw on stage. And like, I feel lucky that I saw Tom Jones. I saw Wayne Newton. I saw the Donnie and Marie show down there in Vegas.
Wow.
And there is something otherworldly about seeing some of these acts, especially in Las Vegas, because it is fun and it's fresh, but it also feels like you've seen it before. I mean, does that make sense? Like where you see something that like feels comfortable and familiar.
Yeah. Play the hits. Play the hits.
But that's the thing is like the Donnie and Marie show, they did some of their, their most famous pieces, but then they also did like a Lady Gaga cover, right? But they did it in a Donnie and Marie style.
Well, that was a very Prince thing to do, right?
True,
like especially when I think about his Super Bowl halftime show, because he did Foo Fighters and a bunch of other people and a bunch of his stuff at the same time, but it was all very Prince, right? It was very, very much Prince on how he would do it.
Well, and it has to be fun for them, because how many times can you sing Purple Rain before you want to spice up your act?
Right.
So,
but then even like well, even like him or say like a Bob Dylan, Bob Dylan, every time you go watch him live now, I don't know how much longer he'll even be alive for us to watch him live, but it's always a new rendition of the song, almost always now, because he just got so bored of it. Yeah. And the fandom was like, you know what? We have your recordings. Let's see something new from you right now. And that worked.
When I toured Paisley Park, one of the things they talked about was Prince was just getting ready for another tour, and the tour was going to be Prince and a piano, and he was going to vamp essentially his hits. And so the last thing you do on the tour before you hit the gift shop is they bring you into this like giant performance space. So it can hold about 400 people. And it's got a bunch of his touring stuff in there, but then they also let you experience like one of his rehearsals for this. And it's just, like I said, it's just Prince, and he sits down and you're listening to him play the piano, and it's beautiful. And all of a sudden, like he goes into I Feel For You, but you've never heard it in this style before. Certainly not the key or the way he's, playing out parts. And I thought to myself, what an opportunity to like re-engage your fans, right? Like, all these songs, but it turns out you don't.
Right. And I think if you change the style, then you listen to the text more, which in the case of Dylan, he doesn't care about the tunes really. He cares about the poetry, So yeah, for Prince to do that, some of my favorite things to buy, I'll very rarely go buy a greatest hits, but I'll go record or I'll go purchase a CD live in whatever, because I know that Billy Joel's going to play Angry Young Man differently on this version that I've heard 1,000 times on this one. So yeah, I agree. That's some wonderful stuff. I'm
not a big I'm not a big country fan, but I'm an enormous Garth Brooks fan.
Oh, okay.
Because I think he's one of the greatest showmen that I've ever seen live. And he had an album that came out in the late 90s called Double Live. And he had gone on this big tour, and he had taken different songs from different shows he had done. And the song, Two Pina Coladas has a verse that you only hear when it's live.
Sure.
It's like the mythical third verse. And what amazes me is Garth, like they start playing the refrain again, and like the crowd cheers, and he goes, "You know what's coming, don't you?" He's like, "You know that when you come to a Garth show, you're gonna get that third chorus." And I'm like, "Yeah, Garth, do it."
Isn't he still? I mean, he's still, because when he just went back on tour a couple of years ago, and I think he might still be the biggest touring act in the world right now.
If he's not, I'd be shocked.
He's up there. He's up there. I mean, no one. I mean, he was selling out football stadiums. That's where he was touring. Was football stadiums.
And
sold out.
When the Win wanted him to do Garth Unplugged, right? So his deal was like, listen, I want to be at my kids' soccer games. We live in Tennessee, and they're like, we'll have a jet fly you from Tennessee to Vegas every day, and we'll only do shows that start at like 10 o'clock at night, so you can put your kids to bed, get on the jet, fly to Vegas, and then we'll fly you home every single night. And he's like, okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. And he did that for like a year.
Oh, my favorite Garth Brooks story is when he was living in Oklahoma. My brother-in-law lives down there, and they were in the small community. And you'd always see Garth and Trish at like the grocery store, and Garth never fixes up. He's got sweats on. He hasn't shaved in for, whatever. And then all of a sudden you'd see him on like a talk show or whatever, and they just show his picture. It's stunning. The big cowboy hat, he's clean shaven. He's got it perfectly. And it's like in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, he's just sitting on his couch like us in his jammies. And
he's one of those guys too, he's one of like the few musical artists out there that good luck finding his stuff online. I mean, and which amazes me, because that's how strong he's able to tie that down, because it's like a sieve. It's like, how do you hold on to all the people re-uploading things over and over again? But really hard to find his stuff online.
Wow. He also has total and complete control of his tours. So like when he played at the Fargo Dome, every single ticket was $70, whether you were in the first row or the last row. And he does that to give everyone a fighting chance. He's like, sure, we could sell the front row for $5,000 a ticket. He goes, but that's not fair to everyone. So when I've seen him live 4 times, 94, like 97, and then like almost back to back when he was in the Twin Cities, and then he came to Fargo that next spring. And when I saw him in the Twin Cities, we were in the 4th row.
Okay.
And again, reason why I like him for a showman. So his wife, Trisha Yearwood, comes out to sing a number, and he doesn't leave the stage. He plays back up like on the guitar for her, but he's not in a spotlight. He's standing behind, and you can see him, and he's smiling the whole time. And I was like, God, any other like major star like goes off stage so that they can, like do a bump of Coke, chug a beer, check their Twitter, whatever it is. But he was on there. He also has this amazing ability to make you feel like this is the best audience he's ever had. Right. And he's like, you guys are great. You came out here, look at this energy. Let's go all night. Yeah. But that there's a 10 o'clock concert that same night. So he's got to turn the whole house around. No matter what, but he just makes you feel so special.
I think Prince too is another example of that too. Yeah. When Prince died and they started showing clips of him on Saturday Night Live, he's never alone. He's always trying to feature someone else. It's like, I've never heard of this person, but she's singing a fourth or half of this song. And as a musician, it's like, okay, yeah, they all have egos and they all have whatever. And, Prince is probably, just from the fact of the way he dresses and what he owns and whatever, you can think that, but he's always got that one person that we've never heard of that all of a sudden he's thinking is going to be the next big thing. And I didn't appreciate that when he was alive. When you watch his clips after he died, it was like, yeah, he's sitting there playing piano on this one because she's out in front doing the thing. And yeah, that's a classy thing amongst musicians. It
really is, when you tour Paisley Park, they talk about too, like, he had this little tiny club that existed at Paisley Park, and people would just come and like hang out there, and randomly Prince would come down and he'd be like, hey, I saw these people play at First Avenue opening for this, so we're going to do a jam session with them right now. Or he'd be like, we're watching Finding Nemo tonight. And everyone would like big screens, like they'd watch Finding Nemo. And like at all hours too, like that club would be open until like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he'd come down at 2:45 and be like, all right, everyone, we're having pancakes.
How awesome would it be to own a bar where all the bartenders are Muppets? Oh. Where you walk up and you're dealing with a Muppet who's serving you at that time. That'd be pretty sweet.
That sort of exists in Disney at the new Galaxy's Edge, because they used the Imagineers had come up with this concept for when Disney World turned like 30 or 40. It must have been the 30th. The idea was they were going to change Disney World to Muppet World for a year.
Oh,
and the Muppets were going to take over for Kermit or for Mickey so that he could go on vacation. And they were going to do this Muppet overlay of everything that would be just slightly crappy, right? Like, so they'd take over Pirates of the Caribbean, but Statler and Waldorf would be like, you know, like in their like, you know, costumes and stuff like that. And it didn't end up happening because of all the like crap that happened with Disney acquiring the Muppets after Jim Henson's death. But they took
what do you mean?
Well, so when Jim Henson died, he was in the middle of negotiations to sell the Muppet property to Disney.
Got it.
And one of the selling points was that Jim was going to be the head Imagineer for like 10 years, like sign a 10-year contract.
That's right.
And Eisner just pulled away. And then the kids all sued and they were like, well, we haven't done anything with this property for 2 years now because we intended to sell it to you. And then they didn't actually end up buying. And the big thing is they weren't going to include the Sesame Street properties. Oh, really? And that was a thing that Jim Henson said, like, nope, Joan Gans Cooney is the one who gets to have ownership. These are not for sale. And then ironically, the kids turned around and sold them to a German television station who piecemealed them and like sold the rights to Big Bird at one point and then sold the rights to Cookie Monster. And it took a long time for the Sesame Workshop to buy those properties back at great expense.
I always thought that Ralph the dog got the shaft. The documentary that's on HBO Max right now, a little bit about Sesame. Yes, excellent. You know, when they're trying to get Sesame Street from like local television onto nationwide things, they always got Kermit and they got Ralph the dog. You know, these are the two that you're going to see. And then Sesame Street starts. We don't see Ralph the dog for like ever. He wasn't in there part of my childhood. He didn't show up until the Muppet Show. I'm like, well, they used him to bring you in and then they left you hanging. So
have you seen the documentary I Am Big Bird?
Yes.
The Carol Spinney story.
Wait till you hear this.
So I saw it in Toronto at the Toronto Film Festival before it had been picked up for distribution. And that cut of it actually had an extra like 20 minutes in it. That when I rewatched it again in a wider release that had been removed, and I understood it was a subplot that wasn't really necessary. But first of all, only documentary that's made me cry within the first minute, because that moment when you're watching Carol get dressed up and then someone's helping him put the top on, and as the hand gets into Big Bird's head, Big Bird comes to life and then looks at the person helping him and says like, hello Janet, or whatever her name was. Yeah. And I was like, oh, Big Bird's real. Oh my God. Yeah, I started crying. But then when it was done, Carol Spinney and his wife came out on stage with Oscar the Grouch. Oh. And Oscar the Grouch took questions from the audience, which was one of the coolest things I've ever been up. I didn't get an opportunity to ask a question, but I was just in awe.
Still to be there.
Oscar the Grouch is right there. He's
real.
right there in front of me. It sounds just like he always did as I watched the show as a kid.
I am so jealous of that.
That's awesome. One of the things that we talked about is as a Sesame Street generation, the whole Snuffleupagus saga. Yeah. Do you guys know the details?
Yeah.
I mean,
because he was originally an imaginary friend, right?
Exactly. And so like throughout my years, nobody could see him except for the little kids and Big Bird. And, the adults would come in and all of a sudden little kids were liars. You're imagining things. And this went on like until I was like in high school. Because I remember someone walking around with a petition in high school saying, knocking on doors. This is a true story. I'm in Mr. Litton's class. Someone knocks on the door where we need a petition. We're tired of these little kids being called liars. Will you sign so that Snuffleupagus can be seen by adults? Bring it in. And even the teacher was like, yes, about time, bring it in. So I don't know what year that changed, but the stuff that we had to go through.
That is fantastic.
And I think it's Gordon who sees him too, and it's that moment where like it's a watershed moment in the history of Sesame Street when one of the adults actually sees.
How does it play out? Is it like
or sees Mr. Snuffleupagus?
Is it like? I mean, I haven't seen that scene itself, but is it like, whoa, what is that thing? It's like, that's the guy we've been talking to you about.
Yeah, it's pretty much.
Are the parents like, we've been seeing him, we've just been messing with you kids because we're jerks?
No, he is like shocked because he's just kind of chastised Big Bird for like Big Bird, like, this is great that you have him in an imaginary frame. He's like, he's not imaginary. He's like, well, Big Bird, like none of us can see him. And then like, Mr. Snuffleupagus is walking away, and like Gordon, I'm sure like the first take was like, damn.
I love the logic of that, where someone's like, yeah, this giant anthropomorphic bird told me that his friend is a woolly mammoth, and I didn't believe him. Exactly. It's like you were talking to a giant bird.
Yeah. Like, what's off the table?
Just assume that it's all true at this point.
This is great because I can tie it back to Garth Brooks, one of the best hosts on Muppets Tonight. Muppets Tonight doesn't get its due, in my opinion, because that was the Muppet Show that was made for my generation, right? And I think they had some great moments. They had some not so great moments, but there was some stuff I think that was good. And then we got some characters out of that have become, like so important to the Muppet universe at this point. Like Johnny Fiamma is, I think, one of the funniest Muppets to come out of that. And then Sal, his monkey manager. But Garth Brooks is a great part in that. Prince had a great episode in that when he did Starfish and Coffee, and they made the Prince Muppet.
And Sandra Bullock, awesome. Was she part of that? Did she
do
the
great one? Yeah,
was she the Manilow one that round? Yeah.
Garth Brooks also one of the most underrated hosts of Saturday Night Live, in my opinion.
I was going to say, I'm trying to think of people who have hosted both shows, who have guested on both shows, and wanting to compare and contrast their appearances. But I don't have a really good running list of Muppet guests in my head. Garth Brooks would be one. So
yeah, because he hosted on Muppets Night. Steve Martin would be another one. I mean, then of course you talk about like that first year Jim Henson was doing the Land of Gorge or Gorg or something like that. The total misstep in they didn't understand what he was doing. He didn't understand what they were doing. But what are you gonna do? Have you seen any of those before?
No idea what that is.
So every episode on Saturday Night Live, there was a Muppet sketch, and it was this distant planet, and there were these aliens who were the Lord and Lady. So it was very Muppet-like, where the eyebrows are really low, so you can barely see in his hand. There was a giant sculpture that talked that looked like it was a toilet seat. And Jim Henson was talking about the thing that frustrated him was the writers for Saturday Night Live were like, this is old stale crap. This is not, like the Muppets aren't hip. We need something. We want to do a scene about somebody, who gets arrested for marijuana, but we can't do it with the Muppets because they're aliens. And it's too bad that it never worked. But in true SNL fashion, the first season of episode 2, hosted by Lily Tomlin, she goes to a filing cabinet. It's like a behind the scenes sketch, and she opens it, and the puppets from the Land of Gorge come out, and they're like, well, are we going to be on this season? She goes, no, it didn't work out with you guys. No one really liked you.
Clever.
And they're like, oh, that sucks.
That's smart. That's clever. Yeah.
But okay, so let's talk music for a little bit too, because that's in your soul.
Yeah.
I was amazed. So I did these things with Brian and Madison where we deconstructed the history of Christmas carols. Okay. And part of that was we needed to actually record the Christmas carols. So it was Jingle Bells and Deck the Halls. And Brian sat down at the piano and just played them. And I am just in awe of talent like that, because it's nothing that I've ever been able to do. And I think it's just amazing that you sit down there and you must have either played it enough in your life where you're like, yep, I got this. But I mean, how long would it take you to learn a song if you wanted to sit down and plug it out?
That's a tough question. I mean, I would put it this way: the years of practice you put prior to make in anything, it makes it look easy once you've done it. If I can sit down and figure out the Muppet Show, yeah, I could probably figure that out in a little bit. But you have to realize I've been doing this for 30 years, and you keep practicing. That's
awesome.
You can't really call yourself a musician unless you are continuing to practice. COVID was a great opportunity for people to practice. Yeah. I was surprised how my muscle memory came back on some certain things. So, you can talk about talent, or some people have better ears than others. You can be classically trained, but not necessarily be able to play by ear and all that, the different variations of that. But it just comes down to, I think, experience. And the Christmas songs, it's one of those things where, every year we've kind of done these. So,
what instruments are in your repertoire?
I think piano is where it all is kind of based from. I was a graduate kind of that Vyroshinsky piano teaching thing out in Castleton, where she had hundreds and hundreds of piano students, including my wife, who's a lot better than I am. So that's the basis of that. So because of that, I was able to succeed in band, playing saxophone, and I still play bass guitar a lot in different bands. But again, piano is the foundation of it.
What is it about piano that makes it such a foundational instrument? Because that's something I remember hearing. I even remember hearing back in elementary school when we were signing up for band, and they were saying, if you want to do drumming, we'd prefer you had experience with piano, but we were 6th graders. And I was like, well, I want to drum, but I have no experience with piano, so I didn't touch it.
Right.
What is it about the piano that sort of, it sounds like it's almost like learning Latin before learning all these other languages.
It's kind of like, that's a great analogy, because you are, first of all, visually, you're seeing all the notes at the same time, which I think is great. When I play my bass guitar, I am actually maybe picturing the piano keyboard because I have that foundation, which makes it different than maybe other guitar players. But you're also learning rhythms at the same time. So a drummer who wants to start in 5th grade, if they've had 2 years of piano, there's not much left rhythm-wise to teach them. They've already had that. I think that's why they maybe go that way, as well as the percussionist also has to play bells, timpani, where you're basically looking at a piano keyboard and just, hitting them with the mallet. So
I wish I hadn't been given that as a kid. I wish I hadn't been told the piano thing as a kid, because I wanted to do drumming really badly. But then when I took it in as, oh, you don't have piano background. Well, you can't do it. So I didn't pursue it. And even to this day, like, because I've had false starts with a number of instruments over the years, trying to get in it, can't get into it. But the one thing I always find myself doing is rhythmic drumming with anything around me. And part of me goes, God, I wish that I had started it back then. I can still start it now, and I might at some point. But the thing my body always wants to do when I'm hearing music is I want to go along with the drums to it for some reason.
And you should pursue that. I think that the problem with doing the piano at a young age is that you are expecting someone to take private lessons in order to play the instrument they want, and that's not cheap.
Right.
So you might have the most talented musician, percussionist in the world who might be a low-income kid who isn't going to get that piano lesson. Well, that's not fair. I mean, let's find a way to make this work. And hopefully if the teacher is decent, they say, spend some time with me, we're going to make this work, and I can teach you what you need to be taught. It's misinterpreted. That's a great way to put it.
Is this the biggest cliche, or is it completely true that only it's little old ladies who teach piano out of their homes? Is that how you find a private teacher for piano?
Little old ladies. Well, my wife is, I would say, not a little old lady. But
does she teach you out of your home?
Yep, she does. Yep, the porch is a studio, and she's been doing it for 27 years, as well as other jobs, church musician. She's playing at the college at M State in Fergus right now. So she's done other things. But yeah, for years, you're right. It's like, okay, the retired lady or...
That's what we had down the block is, and kept piano tuners in business.
Yep. And it's... I don't know. I think in a bigger city like Fargo, you do have more studios. Sometimes they might be part of the colleges because there's colleges all over this area. So you might have a different options, but yeah, that's a cute stereotype.
It makes me think of, like in The Music Man, right? So Marion is also the town piano teacher, right?
Right.
So
right.
The Amaryllis has to come over and beep, 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 and I think like there are a couple episodes of the Andy Griffith Show where Opie has to go play, and it's you bring the 50 cents, to pay for your lesson, and then it's like, listen, I'll let you keep a quarter to go down to the candy store if we can cancel the lesson today. And so I find it to be like the piano is one of those things that my dad had one good party trick, and it's he could play Werewolves of London on the piano, which isn't a lot, right? I mean, it's the same stuff over and over and over again. And once you get to know it, you're good to go. And at one point, my mom was like, we're going to teach the kids piano. And so I think one of the colleges was the end of the year, they did a piano sale, right? So we're getting rid of 10 pianos. And she bought one, and then she told my dad, you have to figure out how to get it to the house. And so my dad took the seed truck from work and 2 guys, and he's like, I'm going to give you guys each $20, and we're going to get this thing. Well, she chose to put it in the basement, and that piano didn't leave that basement until it left in chunks, essentially, when we finally got rid of it, because we have yet to figure out a lightweight version of a piano that's not a keyboard. And it's weird because I think that there are people who look down upon the keyboard.
Yes. And that's one of those things too. And we're getting close because you get some hybrids now. If you go get a hybrid, you can actually get a hybrid grand, which is as close as you've come to that good touch. We look down on the Casio keyboards, or even the ones that you can roll up and put on your coffee table, which is like, okay, that's fine for learning the notes, and it might be good to get your interest, but you need to have something with touch. Well, if the next thing is a Casio, it's not quite the same thing. You want a little bit of resonance, but yeah, we're getting to the point where not many students have a real piano anymore. My wife has 30 piano students, and I bet I can count on one hand how many have a real piano. They have some type of keyboard or some type of hybrid that sounds like a real piano, but you never have to pay to get it tuned.
Well, at the very least, you can use headphones.
True. That is
Especially
a
if these are
benefit.
students that they're in apartments and stuff,
Apartments, college kids. Yeah, that's a huge thing.
I mean, my ability with the piano is very limited. When I was a kid at one point, I was in this toy store and I found one of those giant big long ones. And then the guy who owned the toy developer I was working at, because I recently had been a kid who made a wish to become bigger, and he played it with me. We played chopsticks. It was a wonderful part. And then Elizabeth Perkins took my virginity. It was very awkward though, because remember, I'm only 13 years old technically.
And then we had to drop him into Germany so he could get Private Ryan out because his brothers had died in war.
Yeah, and then I got shipwrecked, or I guess I was working for FedEx at the time, and and I ran across America a bunch, and I was also a cowboy doll. So much.
Wow, that's
a lot happened in my 13.
You went to a different universe there. That's awesome.
Yeah, let's not forget the time that man on death row cured your
my
bladder infection.
Oh yes,
and Cloud Atlas.
Nice.
Before the boom boom.
Nice.
Yeah. So when it comes to, so you work with various singing groups, okay, right?
Yep.
And so, do you believe that anybody can learn how to sing with a group, or is it something where you need to have started earlier?
I think that finding your voice is the first thing. I think that you get to a point where if you can't find that singing voice early on, it's harder later. Especially for boys, the voice change is more dramatic than the voice change for girls. And I do believe if they don't have some help getting through that, they're more likely to shut down and say, "I just don't sing," and they make fun of it the rest of their life. "Oh, I can't. I've got." I'm tone deaf, or whatever they want.
Falsetto is very frustrating for a tenor or for a baritone. Really,
exactly.
Because I was like second tenor baritone, and she was always, Miss Childs was always getting us to sing up there, and we needed to, right? And now, like when your voice is more developed, you can actually get into it more. But I just remember all the frustrations coming along with that and jazz choir and everything else that I was doing at the time.
Yeah, it's stressful for boys, and that's I think why we lose them sooner. Than you never have trouble getting girls to sing in college or high school, really, or in church for that matter. But yeah, sometimes I think if you lose those boys, it's harder to get them back, which is some of the stuff I do on the side is focused on that adolescent voice. I do a junior high choir festival. I did one on Thursday where we had a boys choir and a girls choir, just so that they were surrounded with other boys who have gone through this change. I've written music for adolescent boys choir so that it's in ranges that aren't going to freak them out, like you said, not too high, not too low, and they have some choices. So they just have to be handled a little bit differently. But yeah, they will shut down and they'll maybe never get back to it. But I confidently would say that, hey, if you want to sing with the group, we can get you back to reading music to a certain point. Everyone reads at different levels. I still get that. I'll have someone in church choirs say, "Well, I just don't read music." Well, everyone does read music. The notes go higher, your voice goes higher.
Yeah.
Let's start with that. And then everyone else is a different level past that. That's kind of where I encourage people to try. So.
My wife's home church in Hillsboro has invited me several times to be a guest preacher.
Oh, nice.
And I think that their home pastor really loves that because then he can go on vacation, right?
Yep.
And so the first time I did it was because one of their preachers was retiring, and then the new guy wasn't coming until the next month. So they're like, "Well, we need to fill this random Sunday in July. JJ, would you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I would. I love a captive audience that can't do anything.
Yes.
Like they just have to listen to me."
Yep.
And it worked out so well that I've been back, I think, like almost a dozen times
nice.
now.
Good for you.
But I have no idea when I'm picking music for it. I have no idea. Luckily, there's a lot of great resources out there that help me. Like, oh, okay, this fits. If you're talking about community, here's a song that matches. Blah blah blah. But then the thing that terrifies me is I'm the only person in front of a microphone when it's time to sing those things. And so I always go back because unless I know the hymn by heart, and like there are a couple, like Amazing Grace, I've heard it a million times, right? So I can fake my way through that. But man alive, like I'm always like, okay, listen, anyone else, you be the leader on this one because they're not going to follow me.
Right.
And then the last time I was up there, the woman who plays the organ for them was halfway through like the third stance before I was like, this does not match up what I thought that I chose. And then someone finally yelled up, "You're playing the wrong song, laddie."
You know what that just made me think of?
Yep.
One of my favorite Simpsons moments when Bart switches out the music for, was it Inagata-Davida?
Yeah, by I, Ron Butterfly.
And how she seems powerless to stop herself from playing it, but she's hitting everything.
Yeah.
Love that moment.
Remember when we used to make out to this hymn?
Yeah, I keep trying to have my wife, slip in some of those, Inagata-Davita's a good one. I always play Van Halen's Jump when she's not looking on the keyboard, so I just pound the heck out of it, but yeah, she'll always like, no, that's not appropriate and all this kind of stuff.
Tucker and I had the pleasure of working at the Fargo Theater for a lot of years, and it would be fun whenever somebody would come in and practice something on the Wurlitzer that was not part of the regular grouping of songs, right? And one of my favorite so when bands would come and they would see that the Wurlitzer there, their first question was like, can we incorporate this into our act?
Oh, sure.
And for a lot of years, it was just turn down, which is too bad because these, talk about an interesting thing for these people to like get into.
Yeah.
And I remember the Hold Steady. Were you at that concert?
No.
So the Hold Steady come. And they didn't ask permission. They just asked, like, how do you raise the thing? And do you have to turn it on? And so in the middle of their concert, the Wurlitzer comes up and they don't even have a keyboardist who's a regular part of their band, but he clearly knew what he was doing, came up and they jammed out. And I heard a version of a song I'd heard 100 times, but getting that Wurlitzer to be a part of it was out of this world good.
Nice.
And I think that, that's a memorable moment for the artist. It's a memorable moment for the crowd. And we should be looking more into little things like
Absolutely.
Again, let's pull it back to the Muppets, right? It's no wonder Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem took over that Presbyterian church, right?
Yeah, right,
Great
exactly.
acoustics in there, and there's already a built-in organ for them to jam on.
When your instrument is literally the building.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically the Wurlitzer is part of the building. We're talking giant rooms that are a part of it. And if they're not there, it doesn't work. Also talk about what might look like the most intimidating instrument of all time.
Yeah, it looks like you're right. Every time there's a different level of keys, even on some of the church organs, one or two, okay, that's cool. And they get to be 3 or 4 and you start thinking, oh boy, here we go. Yeah.
Right. Well, and like there were little Post-it notes on the Wurlitzer too for like what the specific thing was, because it's not just the pipes. It's also, you've got this thing that, like plays like a cymbal type thing in the back. And, you can make the sound of, like a heart, like something pulls across harp strings.
Yep.
And when you think about the just design of those where, like JP Wurlitzer must have been like, and the drum as well, please.
Well, and one of the best places in Phoenix to go is Organ Pizza. Have you ever been to an Organ Pizza place?
No.
Okay, it's almost worth the trip to go to Phoenix, and I think it's maybe in Mesa, but it's one of those deals where it's a Wurlitzer type organ, and then all the different stops control the percussion, but it's built into the walls around.
What?
Yeah, and if people have been to Phoenix to see grandparents, they've probably gone there at one point or another. And we just went there probably 5-6 years ago, and people bring up requests, and you're thinking, what are they going to do? This guy's been there, but this is all he does. So some little girl brought out "Let It Go" from Frozen. And I'm thinking, all right, and it starts out. By the time he was done, you had explosions going off on these different percussion things, and it was just majestic. So yeah, you can Google it, Facebook it, Organ Pizza, Mesa, Arizona, and there might be one in Florida too. But it's worth the trip.
How's the pizza?
Pizza's great. It's
Okay, good.
It's similar to Dwayne's House of Pizza, kind of that thin crust. And I'm sure they have more options, but for my childhood, I wanted to go there again and have what I had. So.
Was it you who taught me that Dwayne's uses provolone and
Provolone
not
cheese,
mozzarella?
yeah.
Yep.
That blew me away when I found that out.
So let's talk about restaurants in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, here you go.
So
1257.
yeah, I saw. So my grandfather had a winter place down in Phoenix, and then a set of my cousins moved down there. So once a year, probably, we would go down there and visit them. And there's a restaurant called Bobby Mcgees.
Oh.
That was sort of like a kitschy, almost like a Chuck E. Cheese, but not like animatronics. So the menu was really fun, and then you could order like the special Bobby McGee cup, and sometimes it would be like a porcelain like toilet that you would drink out of, and then the next time you go down there, it's some other thing, but it's all meant to, it becomes a candle votive when you're done with it, and so you take it and it's collectible, and then all the staff dress in really nice Halloween costumes.
Oh,
so
wow.
like 2 times that we went there as a kid, I remember our waiter was dressed as like a Boy Scout, but like a full adult, and like the short shorts ended like really high up on the thigh. And that used to be like my favorite place to go down in Phoenix. I thought it was just the best restaurant, and I have found out that it has now closed, and it has not survived into the modern era. And
that was your Casa Bonita?
It was my, but like, have you been to Casa Bonita? I have, and it is awful, but like, it is an experience. Have you ever been to a Casa Bonita? So when you get into a Casa Bonita, it looks like a ride at Disney World. The queue line is so long for it. And so you go in and you wait in this huge long queue line, and then you get up to a counter, and that's where you order your food. And it's all Mexican style food. Okay. And then they open up these double doors, and you walk into this 3-story tall room, enormous room. And there's video games, but there's also this giant like cliff water feature on the end. And every now and then someone comes out on like the 2-story tall landing and does like a big dive into a pool down below.
Very cool.
So you're watching cliff diving, but then sometimes a woman will come out in a bikini, and then someone is dressed as a gorilla will come and take her and then bring her up to the top. And then the cliff diver will dive and like catch her like while they're out there. Wow. And then the highlight is you have a little flag on your table, and you can put it up to green, and you can put it down to red. And when you put it up to green, they bring an endless supply of sopapillas to your table. And it's now, it used to be in like a shopping district in Denver. Okay. And now it is in a not so great neighborhood, where it is, like a huge crime rate. And so there's a question of, will this place be able to last? Because it's not an area you really want to go to and like leave your minivan unattended for 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
Didn't Trey Parker Madstone buy it though?
They tried to buy it, and I don't think I think the owners held on to it, and they were like, no, we'll limp it through a little bit longer.
That's silly.
I love a good themed restaurant.
Yeah, me too.
Where you get like an experience while you're at it.
Yep.
There's a place called Wells Fargo Pizza in Colorado Springs that was this 2-story tall, looked like you're inside of a riverboat, like a gambling riverboat. And the pizza was mediocre, but the experience was fun because they did like a stage show with girls in like the ruffled skirt, doing the kicks, the can girls. I would go there 100 times just to like go and enjoy like the ambiance.
Yep, that's missing from a lot of restaurants these days. Just a little bit of entertainment. It doesn't have to be live music, but yeah, just something a little bit different. Right. Where they're dressed a little different. So yeah,
it's like cool. In Chicago, the place that like tourists would love to go eat. So if I had like company in town, I would take them to Ed DeBevick's.
Oh, loved it. Been there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Ed DeBevick's is fun. It's an insult restaurant. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been to an insult restaurant or like a Dick's Last Resort?
I haven't been to one, but I'm aware of them.
I have a feeling that you would like it for 2 seconds, and then you'd be like, these mozzarella sticks better be flipping great.
Yeah. The abuse I had to take to get them out here. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I see like church groups and like elementary schools like going to like an Ed DeBevick's, and I'm like, well, that's all right because it's 50s diner style. Right. But then I also see like families going to Dick's Last Resort where they're like lost his virginity behind a Taco Bell, and like that's hat they put on you that you're supposed to wear the whole time.
Oh, that's a little much for that.
Right? But yeah, I love a good themed restaurant that's got like some oomph to it. And that's where like a Muppet like restaurant would be amazing. Like where you go to a counter and you order from like Ma Bear or something like that.
And the Chuck E. Cheese is, that's where a dumbed down version of that, or what it was before Chuck E. Cheese. I can't remember.
Showbiz Pizza
with the bear and the little thing going on. That's very Muppet like.
I was very attracted to the mouse, the lady mouse. Do you remember that episode where we talked about that in depth? You can go back. It's a picture of the mouse.
Showbiz.
Well, no, wasn't it? It was the bird. You liked the bird because Chuck E. Cheese was the mouse.
No. When it was Showbiz, it was a female mouse like cheerleader that was next to Billy Bob, and then they had the surfer dog.
Got it. Because
but
then the cheerleader turned into a bird.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And I am not attracted to birds.
Yeah.
I just want to get that out there.
But
that,
every
like,
once in a while, there is a Muppet that might come along, or a cartoon character that's like, well,
because like I can watch like the bird from the McDonald's commercials and not feel anything. That's right.
But
right.
the Gadget from Rescue Rangers.
Bingo, done. And I'm attracted to her talent.
Gidget or Gadget?
Gadget.
Yeah.
Gadget. Gidget would be different because I've known a dog and a pig in real life named Gidget, and so I would have a hard time getting past that. I'll end this podcast on a quick story, and you guys tell me what you think about it. Okay.
All right.
So, my wife grew up not on a farm, but like on the outskirts of a rural town.
Okay, Hillsboro, we're talking
Hillsboro,
still?
yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
And so there's like they're surrounded by like cornfields and everything like that. And at one point, her dad got a potbelly pig, and it got to be a rather large pig. Right now, they don't have a pig pen or anything like that. So this pig just kind of wandered around wherever, and it had a stained circle around its face because when they would make things like meatballs, they would put them out for the pig to eat, and the pig would put its face in the crock pot and get like a little stain around his little face. So the pig unfortunately passes away, and they've got to do something because now they're talking about a sizable dead farm animal in the middle of winter, mind you, is when it died. And the question was like, we don't want to attract coyotes and stuff like that.
There's going to be an investigation. Yeah.
Right. So they're like, what we can do is Pete and Claudia work at Crystal Sugar. We'll just get one of those industrial like chemical bins and we'll put it in there. Like once the chemical's all gone and because it's got a sealable top, the same stuff you can get at like Don's Car Wash. Like when they're done with their car wash chemical, you can buy it for $5, right?
I thought they were going to melt the body.
No. Nothing that deep yet. So Pete and like another guy lift up this pig and they put it in this barrel, but they didn't quite get the dimensions right because the pig gets stuck halfway.
Oh, jeez.
So its gut is now stuck in this thing, and they can't get the pig out without like having to cut this barrel open. And so they're like, "What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?" And like, well, okay, we'll figure out a little bit. Well, it got so cold that the pig froze, and so now you're doubly in trouble.
Man.
And so Jill told me that she came home, she like school bus stops, and as she's walking down, all she sees is this giant pig's butt and the little tail at the end sticking out of the top of this barrel. And I was like, so what did you guys end up doing? And she goes, I was traumatized because this was our family pet, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm seeing how the sausage gets made, literally. And she goes like, I think they ended up having to rent a piece of heavy equipment to dig into the frozen earth and then, bury the pig in the barrel. So somewhere on that property is half of a pig skeleton inside of a barrel underground.
Inside of a barrel.
Right?
Oh, what a great.
So the question I have for you guys is, what's the saddest part of your childhood with a pet?
Well, the first thing that I can't say it's the saddest. I've had a number of pets die, but the first time I remember being genuinely upset, we had a lizard named Nick. He was a chameleon, they changed color, right? Chameleons.
Yeah, chameleon.
It was a little version, like one of those. I think we had him for a week, and then he died. And I was so distraught over the death of our pet lizard that for a week at school, I did nothing but draw artwork of my dead lizard.
Oh,
Wow.
I was so sad that he was gone. But that wasn't, I've had sadder moments than that. But from my childhood, that was the saddest one.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And it clearly, I mean, you had that like ready to go. Like it was amazing.
That's just it's what sprang to my mind is the moment you asked.
Mine is that my dog got ran over when I was 6, which is traumatic enough. Man, we never got another pet, and that was it. But the worst part of it, and I've told this story before, is that jump ahead 14 years or whatever, and I'm coaching baseball, and one of my players, I know that it was his dad was one that hit my dog.
Oh no!
So I made the comment like, I'm sorry. When I look at you, I remember when you were a baby and, your dad ran over my dog. And without a stop, he looks at me. Yeah, he ran over a lot of dogs. Okay. So I had that pain.
Oh my
15,
God.
16 years later. Flash ahead 25, 30 more years. Okay. My wife is now this gentleman's grandson's piano teacher. So I saw him this May.
Oh,
He walks into our church in Elbow Lake, And of course, the first, how you doing? Nice to see you. How are you doing? I'm thinking in my head, it's been 45 years, but you killed my dog.
Dog murderer.
Dog murderer. Dog murderer.
Sorry, I was late. I was washing all the dog off my car before I got over here.
Oh.
You're like, well, I see all your paperwork's here, and this loan does look attractive. We're going to have to deny it.
There's some stuff online about you.
Be like, I've auditioned for the choir every year for 40 years, and I just can't seem to get in. Oh, that's unfortunate. Well, there you go. Bryan, thank you so much for being a guest. I feel like we barely scratched the surface of what we
didn't
can
even
talk
talk about Boba Fett. There'll be plenty of time.
I think we got to let the full series go before we really dig into it, because right now it's getting kind of raked across the coals.
Here's a sneak preview of that episode.
Oh, see?
Of that last episode?
Yeah.
Like
Just Boba Fett in general.
Oh, just in general?
That's going to be my review.
Oh, really?
I'm giving you a preview of my review right now.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay. See? Tucker, like halfway through a movie, like Tucker saw The Crying Game, and he's like, I don't get it. Like, what's the big deal? He didn't wait until the end.
Mm-hmm.
She turned out to be a man.
In the water,
She turned out to be a man. Forrest Gump, he's like, I don't get it. He's a war hero. What does he have to complain about? But thank you very much, Bryan. We appreciate you coming by.
Like I said, I enjoyed talking with you guys because the generational thing is just so fascinating to me. I mean, you guys have great outlets. Both of you, I've been listening to you, and the stuff you touch on, 90s nostalgia, it's totally what I would be doing, except at a different year level. So keep doing what you guys are doing. It's
fantastic.
really enjoyable.
And I love the fact that we put that ask out there of like, what should we cover on future podcasts? And like Bryan was there. You're like, yeah, here we go. So fantastic. Again, thanks for stopping by. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. God, that guy, there's something about him. Like, I don't know what it is. He asked for my social security number before he left.